Well, there is certainly trepidation about whether this ceasefire can last, and it is hanging over the NATO meeting in The Hague, where Prime Minister Mark Carney is today. Earlier, he spoke to CNN about the developing situation, and he responded to concerns about Iran's decision to strike an American airbase in Qatar last night.
We never welcome, obviously, hostilities and reactions, but it was proportionate. It was de-escalatory. It appears to have been previewed, which allowed, and they're Canadian soldiers at the Qatari base as well.
Did you get them out of harm's way?
They were out of harm's way, yes.
For more on this and the broader conversation about Canada's military, General Jennie Carignan is Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff. Hello.
Hello, Catherine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I do want to start with this question of Israel and Iran and the Canadian soldiers who were taken out of the Qatari base, out of harm's way, as we just heard. What more can you tell us about the number of Canadians who were affected and what the future holds for them?
So we currently have around 230 Canadian military soldiers in the region, and of course we are monitoring the situation very closely and making sure that we take on the proper measures to ensure their protection. So everything is definitely being monitored very closely.
I appreciate this is a very sensitive matter, but what can you tell us about how the armed forces, Canada's armed forces, were made aware that this strike was impending?
So, of course, once the strike were happening, we were informed that this was ongoing. So when the United States or any country for that matter decide to go and make strikes, and then they work then with their allies to make sure that we manage what might come after.
I just want to make sure that I understand. We believe, we know the United States was given a heads up that these strikes were happening. Are you saying that Canada only learned once they were in progress that some members of the Canadian Armed Forces could be in danger?
So we work very closely with our partners in country to make sure that we have a good situational awareness, and then again the necessary actions are taken as things are ongoing. But we definitely get a heads up as well.
Okay. The ceasefire, such as it is, seems to be shaky, tenuous right now. What are the implications for Canadian Armed Forces in the region if this ceasefire does not hold?
So for us, it's always about monitoring the situation. It's always about making sure that we are aware of the changes and that we take the necessary measures. But it is also about supporting the work that Global Affairs Canada do to support Canadian citizens as well in the region who may want to require assistance to leave. So, of course, the military offers support as required. But for the moment, we have pre-positioned planners with Global Affairs Canada to ensure that, again, we are well aware of what's going on the ground.
You have said, it has been discussed previously, that a Department of Defence report said that Canada's armed forces are short 14,000 members. To what extent do we have the capacity to help further in the region, be it with evacuations, or should the situation further intensify?
So we have gained some ground since then, so we are more around 12,000 at the moment. But again, we are gaining ground in recruiting more people within the Canadian Armed Forces. But really, in terms of a potential military assistance to departure, we are not in that scenario for now. We are ensuring that the Canadians can be extracted from the country based on commercial or other means. But again, we remain postured to support as required.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about the big picture, military spending for Canada. We all understand that the objective for this NATO meeting is to get countries to all agree to 5% of GDP devoted to the military. We've heard about a whole range of timelines, one of them being 2029. Given the staffing challenges, and I know you noted they're improving, but they're still significant procurement challenges, do you believe it's possible for Canada to spend that much money in just the next 4 years?
So what the foundation that we are presently building is ensuring that we have the people and we have a solid foundation upon which we can build additional capabilities and grow the Canadian Armed Forces. Of course, the plan also involves ensuring that our defense industrial base is also well prepared and resourced to take on additional production or capacities. So it is really a holistic plan to ensure that the foundations are well laid out. And should we be in a posture where more is required, then we'll be able to respond. But it will be important to have a long-term plan in order to get there.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, and I appreciate you say there's work to do, the work is ongoing, but there are limits to how quickly Canada can hit the gas, are there not?
So it is clear that we cannot do everything all at the same time, but also there is already a significant number of new capabilities that are already being programmed and built as we speak. So we can take our new frigates as an example, are under construction. We have new systems as part of the NORAD modernization system, uncrewed air vehicles, maritime is in the same type of situation. So we have a lot of new projects already ongoing.
Okay.
Now it's about ensuring that we keep up with the pace that they are required.
You gave us a list there. To what extent would Trump's Golden Dome be, to your mind, play an important role in Canada's security?
So it is clear that the Golden Dome is a U.S. plan, and on our side, we will be onboarding new capabilities for the sovereignty of our territory, and that includes detection. That also includes interception. But again, we have to lay complementary systems, multi-domain sensors to ensure that we can detect threats that can come our way, but also the necessary capabilities to intercept what comes to us. And of course, as part of the Golden Dome, it is a lot more efficient and easier to do it together. Because, as you can imagine, missiles don't have borders, and then again, much more efficient in working together in doing this.
I hear what you're saying, General Carignan. I wonder, though, I mean, it is such an extraordinary amount of money that the President has talked about. To what extent does Canada really need this thing? I mean, if we are indeed talking about billions upon billions of dollars, I know the figures have changed, what would you say to Canadians about why that would be a good place to put all that money?
So we already have committed a lot of investments towards the modernization of NORAD, which includes sensors, it includes new fighters, it includes, again, UAVs and other space systems as well, over-the-horizon radars. So we are already investing significantly into our sovereignty. So again, we need to understand that our geography does not protect us as well as it used to. And again, with adversaries who now are clearly adopting an aggressive posture, it is clear that we have to make sure that we are well protected.
You told the Toronto Star you'd like to see Canada buy more F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. Now, this is despite the Auditor General's report about the ballooning costs. We know the Prime Minister is trying to build closer defence ties with Europe. Why is it that you believe Canada should invest in more F-35s at a time when there is this concern about over-reliance on the U.S.?
Well, what I said, to be clear, is that we are committed to the first 16, and then we are currently reviewing to make sure that we are still going ahead with the proper capabilities. So the analysis is ongoing. It's in its last weeks of putting it together, and then within the next few months, the government will be able to make the decision.
Well, I want to be clear then, because it did seem from my reading of that article that you had, to some extent, chosen a lane. You said, you know, we might need a few more, specifically of the F-35s. Are you saying that's not the case?
What I'm saying is that we might, depending on what the review will actually tell us. So once we see the data, we can present to the government for decision.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your time today, General Jennie Carignan, Chief of the Defence Staff. Fresh off announcing a boost to Canada's defence spending, Prime Minister Mark Carney suggests the government could spend billions more.
It's important to be clear what we are potentially, and I think likely to all agree tomorrow, which is, and let's take the 5% of GDP figure, which is a big,
huge chunk.
Big number.
How much is it actually for you?
5% of our GDP would be about $150 billion. Where we sit today, collectively, we NATO countries are likely to agree to the other component of that 2% going to the 3.5% in 10 years.
The Prime Minister is at the NATO summit in The Hague, where the United States is expected to push allied nations to agree to increase the benchmark for defense spending to a combined 5% of GDP. That's 3.5% for direct military funding and 1.5% for defense infrastructure. This is something NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte praised the U.S. president for in a series of text messages, writing, "You are flying into another big success in The Hague this evening. It was not easy, but we got them all signed on to 5%. Donald, you have driven us to a really, really important moment for America and Europe and the world. You will achieve something no American president in decades could get done." All right. Is that the case? Let's bring back the power panel to talk about this. It's hard not to linger on those laudatory texts, Kate.
Secretary General Rutte read art of the deal, clearly.
Indeed. Well, and I think it does tell us something about how leaders are approaching the president at this moment. But I think where we want to focus in on for a minute is obviously what this means for Canada. This is a heck of a lot of money. Is 5% in Canada's best interest?
I think there's what's in Canada's best interest and what is actually reasonable and attainable. And part of the reason that successive governments have been so reluctant to declare a GDP target has been because we lack the people power to actually put procurement to use. Obviously, the interview with the Chief of Defence Staff highlighted that. That is not a problem that is going to be fixed in 1 year or maybe even 3 or 5 years. So there's a number that you can put on paper to sound good at NATO meetings, and then there's the more practical reality of how to make that money work for Canada. I did find it interesting that to get to 5%, Prime Minister Carney was talking about reliance on critical minerals and how we would be able to use future revenues from that to drive some of that defense spending. It was the Prime Minister during the campaign that said Poilievre and the Conservatives were using magic numbers when they were forecasting future revenues to help offset some of their budget considerations. So it's, again, one thing to make that commitment. It's another thing to finance it, and it's another thing to put it into use. Right now, it's just messaging. I'll wait to see if there's actual action.
Michelle, I mean, it's sort of inconceivable, the very nature of the way that Canada works. You know, all the member countries are going to come out of this saying, hey, we're on the same page, even though there are countries like Spain who have already said, could you put a little asterisk next to us? We're not ready to get to 5%. I wonder, how committed do you think Canada and other countries will really be coming out of this? I mean, if the deadline is something short, 4 years, 5 years, countries have not met their NATO spending targets in the past. I mean, how much does this conversation truly matter?
Well, I think that, given the context of the world, what's been going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Ukraine, things have changed quite a bit. And that peaceful kind of existence where we could ignore those NATO commitments, I was part of a government that did so as well, it was just a different time. I think it's going to be very interesting. What year, when do we have to actually achieve that? What's the commitment to? And then the other thing is, just breaking apart that 5%, the 1.5% or 2% that goes towards actual infrastructure. And that really talks about some of the investments likely that we're making in the Arctic and some of the defense stuff up there. So, I think that there's some different ways to break it down. There's probably some costs that, whether it's the Coast Guard or some other existing things that are programmatic spending that we're already doing, or that infrastructure that we've committed to that might kind of be put towards that as well. What I'm saying is, devil's in the detail. But broad basis, even as you kind of reshuffle things and put them into a different column on the spreadsheet, it's a huge number, and it's not something that any party was contemplating during the election campaign. But I think that the Prime Minister sees this as a path for our economy as well, and a way for investment, and a way to actually, achieve part of his other target of making us a little bit less dependent on the United States in terms of our economy. So it'll be interesting to see how this actually rolls out, and the details of it. But it's high expectations out there now, and I don't think that Mr. Carney makes commitments that he doesn't intend to meet.
Emily, I'm interested in your take on what the limits of the public and political appetite are for this in Canada. I mean, we've seen there's this rush to support for 2% reflected in public opinion polls. Even in the last few months, it's obviously spurred on by global dynamics, Donald Trump in particular. But does 5% start going beyond that? Do we start to see political or public pushback, do you think?
There's a point at which you will see it. And I'm going to draw a connection with things that are unrelated, but not so politically, in the sense that we are in 2025. We've all sort of forgotten that 2025 was a year and a really strong deadline when it came to goals to avoid the climate crisis, and that we were supposed to reach a certain target by 2025 to avoid high risk of essentially climate collapse. That deadline is passed, and nobody's talking about this anymore. We've just had forest fires, and there's a heat wave going on right now in Montreal. We're all ignoring it. There's also WHO, who just been defunded. During the pandemic, it was a huge priority to look at global health. There is currently, as we speak, more high risk of global pandemic as a result of American money being not committed to international organizations anymore. It's not a political crisis, and we're also not necessarily batting our lashes too much about this. And so right now, we're talking about defense, and we are committed to this because of the threat that Donald Trump posed, and just the exchange of texts with the NATO Secretary General is so telling, in the sense that Europe and Canada is trying to break up with Donald Trump and telling him, congratulations, we love you, it was your leadership that made us do this. The double speak here is marvelous to look at, but it really is something that, I in the last couple of years, I've come to marvel at how fast we shift our national priorities and our concerns. Just last year, everybody was so concerned about foreign interference. Now we've also completely forgot about it. Nothing very concrete has been done about this. And so right now we're focused on NATO. I hope it lasts, in the sense that it's a really important crisis. But I also know that the political mood is really volatile.
If I could just chime in really quickly on something Emily said, people don't know what the other side of that cost is yet, right? Like, part of the challenge with not having an economic statement, not having a budget, we have this macro defense spending number that's been put out there, and it's existential to people. People don't know yet, voters don't know yet what they won't get as a result of financing that commitment. Once that becomes more clear, once there's an understanding of what 5% actually means for real people in terms of what it's not going to fund, then I think you start to risk that pushback from the public about whether or not it's an appropriate use of public money. But we don't know yet even how that initial path to 2% is going to really have an impact on programming and services that Canadians rely on.
Jason, I wonder, there's also the question of, can we do this? Like, to what extent is this something Canada, on top of like our willingness to commit to it and to live up to our word, whether this is something the country can pull off right now, given all the procurement challenges we've faced?
Well, I know other people who have kids in there, but I'm directing them to a future in defense procurement, because I feel like that's the future on this trajectory. you listen to what Carney said on CNN International. He was talking about 3.5 as a reasonable goal at in a decade time. So 5% seems like it's as much as everybody's trying to nod along with Trump as opposed to invoking his ire, as everybody seems to want to avoid, especially Mark Rutte in those texts. That could be an extreme stretch goal, and maybe one achieved with much very careful, crafty accounting, because let's face it, not even U.S. is there. So this would not only cause budget strain for countries like Canada, U.S. would have to further bust its budget that Trump is stretching to accomplish that. I would also note to Emily's excellent point that it wasn't long ago that the Pentagon itself, the U.S. Department of Defense, was talking about climate change as a national security threat. So maybe in some future where 5% is a really bad enough as a target, maybe putting up climate defenses in countries could contribute to that lofty target they have.
Michelle, does Donald Trump deserve the credit here? If the 32 members of NATO are all going to commit to this, I mean, no one has banged the drum as hard as Donald Trump on getting countries to up their defense spending. I think you have to acknowledge part of this is also questions about the extent to which the U.S. will continue to be there to support other NATO members. Trump's made that kind of explicit. But is this a gold star for Donald Trump in doing what he said he would do?
Well, I certainly acknowledge that the Americans of many past administrations have been insisting that NATO members actually step up and get to the target that they all committed to very, very long ago. Donald Trump probably held out the most threats about it. And so whether that was the impetus or it happened to coincide with a lot of friction and a lot of things happening in the world, it might be the confluence of those events. But got to say he was very vocal about it. I think that the opportunity that the Prime Minister sees now about actually, both meeting that target and perhaps trying to wave off a key ally and bring him on board for other issues as well. I guess it's the art of negotiation and global diplomacy. So I think that everyone is hoping that the NATO meeting is constructive and that there continues to be support for Ukraine. And quite frankly, that this deal that seems to have been constructed in the Middle East perhaps is sustainable. So, I think that there's so many files happening on the world order that you have to acknowledge that Donald Trump is playing a different role than what we've seen in the past. But I guess everyone's stepping up in a different way as well.
Indeed. I mean, it is, you lay out that list there, Michelle, and it gives us a reminder of the amount of flux that we are living in the world right now and uncertainty and change that we've seen even in the last few months. So perhaps a reflective note to end on. Thank you very much. Always appreciate your reflections. The Power Panel, Emilie Nicolas, Michelle Caderio, Kate Harrison, and with us today, Jason Markusoff.